I am so happy to have you here. I don't know why I just did this. I'm so happy to have you here. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Courtney K.R. I am a dystopian and fantasy writer, currently working on a dystopian fantasy. On this channel, I talk about all things writing and creativity. Today we are chit-chatting about 7 ways you can become a better writer without actually writing. Now, of course, we know that if you want to get better at writing, you have to write. There's literally no way around that. It works like that for every single skill and every single craft that you can attempt to do. If you want to get good at it, you have to do it. However, this video is for the people who are maybe in a writing slump, or if you're taking an intentional break from writing but still want to refine and grow in your craft, or maybe you just want to add some more creative supplements to grow as a writer. Let's jump into it. Number 1, analyze the books that you read. Reading is so important. It's critical to becoming a good writer. You literally cannot be a good writer if you don't read. Fight me on that. I will stand by that. I will die on that hill. If you don't read, you can't write. But more importantly, rather than just reading passively, actually take the time to read analytically, which means going into the themes, the character arcs, the things that actually make the story good, thinking deeply about what you're reading. Now, yes, this does sometimes take away from the entertainment factor of reading, and that's not to say that you shouldn't ever read a book just to read a book, but as writers, we're also reading to become better writers, to glean what we can work on and how we can grow. And that means looking at what other writers do really well and borrowing from that. When I say borrowing, I don't mean like copy and pasting, I mean like being inspired by and using it to critique your own writing, using it as a backdrop to compare your writing in a healthy way. And it also means looking at the things that you really don't like. If there's something in a book that is just not working for you, maybe it's the pacing or the characters or the plot as a whole, take note of that, write that down, and ask yourself, what can I do to make sure that I don't make those same mistakes in my story? Also, don't be afraid to annotate, grab some sticky notes. I don't know how y'all feel. Some people love writing in their books. I think I'm gonna try it with the book that I'm reading right now. But overall, I don't usually like it. But there are some people who are all for writing in their books, and if that's you, do it. Like, that is literally gonna help you grow times 10. Write in your books, annotate your books, learn from the books that you're reading. Reading tons of books also helps us become familiar with our genre and the tropes and trends that are popular and prevalent in the areas that we're writing in. So overall, reading is so important. Please do it. You will become a better writer for it. Number 2, this is a quick one. Watch movies. There you go. Watch movies. Movies are just stories in pixels and pictures. You can learn so much from them. The exact same things that you can learn from a book, you can learn in a movie, pretty much. I mean, you're not going to learn like the technical writing things from watching a movie, but character arcs, story arcs, plot, pacing, you can get all of that from a movie. You can even learn critical things about dialogue from a movie. Now, of course, the same rules apply. You can't just passively watch it. I mean, you can, and you can still like gain something from that, and you can still enjoy it, but you're going to get the most out of it if you are actually like noticing and engaging with it and asking yourself questions while you're watching and looking for all of the little things like, oh, this character's going through this part of the hero's journey, or oh, I recognize that story beat, that's the Dark Night of the Soul. I love how it was done. I love the internal and external push and pull and the conflict and the tension that's created through that. Watching movies is great. Definitely do it. Number 3, this is a fun one. Somebody just came out of their car and really distracted me. Number 3, this is a fun one. I love doing this. Read Goodreads reviews. It's literally like a cheat code for writers. Now, I talked about reading books and how we read books as writers. And so sometimes we get really technical and analytical when we're writing, which, like I said, is a good thing. But on the flip side of that, sometimes we forget, like, what do people actually care about when they're reading? And I notice for myself when I'm writing, sometimes I get so caught up in like the details and the prose and like, does this sound beautiful? And like, does this sentence flow with this sentence? And like, is this a perfect scientific concoction of story beats and tension and push and pull and conflict? And most readers don't care about that. And the beauty about Goodreads and reading reviews is that you can go on to different books and see, what did readers really love? what drew them in. Was it the characters? Was it the plot? Was it the atmosphere? Like, what are readers actually caring about? And it helps us to fine tune and realize that, like, when we step back, it's about the story. People just want to read a good story. And through reading Goodreads reviews, we can understand better and better what it's like to be in the mind of our readers. What do they want more of? What do they find boring? What did they like about a book that maybe we didn't like? What did they dislike about a book that we liked? I just find so much enjoyment in reading through Goodreads reviews and noticing and taking note of things that readers don't like so that I can make sure that I don't do those things in my story. It also helps because sometimes we're really biased about our own writing and the tropes that we use or the things that we're doing in our writing that we get so attached to it and so focused on it. And then we realize that maybe people aren't actually looking for that, or maybe people don't actually like that. Reading Goodreads reviews kind of reminds me when I'm taking ballet class and I hear the teacher correct someone beside me, and I look at my own form and my own body and I realize I'm making the exact same mistake. And so by looking at other people's critiques and corrections, we can notice that within our own self, and so it just builds awareness. And when we see that readers don't like something, we can make sure that we're not doing that in our own story. Number 4, sweet and simple, observe the present moment. Writing atmospherically requires us to have a keen awareness of the present moment. The things that bring a story to life are often small. They're the tiny little details. So think about it this way. We all know what white room syndrome is. You're writing and there's no description whatsoever. I could write right now that I am sitting in a room. That is a true statement. I am sitting in a room. However, that doesn't tell you anything about me. It doesn't tell you anything about my emotional state, my atmosphere. It tells you nothing. Now, if I say I am sitting in a room surrounded by dust and books and candles and the scent of roses, that gives you something more to work with. You can make some inferences about who I am as a person and what the atmosphere of that room is like. You are given more detail. The more that we notice the details in our everyday life, the more that we're able to translate those details into our writing. Something that I really love to do is just to go into coffee shops and look at people, which I know probably sounds creepy, but I just notice little things about them. And I ask myself, how would I write that person's face? How would I describe the unique color of red that they're wearing? How would I describe the smell in this coffee shop? Like, is it bitter? Is it sweet? Is it savory? How would I describe the music? How would I describe the air? Is it warm? Is it cold? Am I hot because I just drank coffee? Like, what can I add? Like, what little details can I infuse into the scene? And we become so much better at that just through observing the present moment, just by looking around at our environment and becoming more aware of all of those little things. It's all about building awareness so that we can carry that awareness into our writing sessions. Number 5, critiquing other writers. I love this one. Beta read, do reading critiques, exchange critiques, do whatever you need to do. Get your eyes onto other writers, preferably amateur writers. It's one thing to look at published writers whose work has been through rounds and rounds and rounds of editing and who have a whole team behind them usually. It's another thing to look at the work of a writer whose work is still raw, who's maybe in the process of still refining their craft and learning and growing, and by noticing their mistakes, again, this kind of goes back to what I talked about with the Goodreads reviews, by noticing their mistakes and by noticing what they do well, and by also responding to what they're doing, we can grow times a billion. Like, literally my most revelatory moments as a writer have come from reading the works of other people who are where I am, or maybe even a step behind where I am. Because if we can notice but also articulate what needs to change within a story, we're then able to, I sound like a broken record, but carry that awareness into our own writing. Like, it literally always goes back to that, is having awareness. Writing is all about self-awareness. Growing as a writer is all about being aware of where you suck as a writer and then doing what you can to grow in that. And critiquing is so powerful because it forces you to articulate and to teach and to show how to grow. It's also just really fun, and your writing friends will probably love you for it. Number 6, read outside of your genre. This one's a hard one for me. I am such a like fantasy nerd. Like it's literally all I read, and for a very long time I literally could not have told you the name of a single historical fiction book or a sci-fi book or anything, like a romance book. I couldn't have told you anything because all I read was fantasy. And then I would sit down to write a scene that was maybe more romantic or maybe needed some like sci-fi elements, and I was completely lost. I was like, I don't know how to write romance. I was like, I have no idea how to create intimacy between characters, how to do, I don't know any of that. This is like a real life thing that literally happened to me when I was writing Project Above Below. I was like, I don't know how to do this. I had to force myself to read romance and to actually get into it. And number one, I figured out that I love reading romance. Number two, I can actually write romance now so much better because I actually read and studied how people wrote romance so that I could become better at it. So this one's pretty simple. Read outside your genre, study outside your genre. You'll become way more well-rounded, way more diverse, which will then translate into your work regardless of what genre you're writing. It'll just make you so much stronger, so much stronger. And finally, number 7. This one is kind of cheating because it does involve writing depending on how you approach it, but number 7 is role-playing. Now there are a couple of ways to think about role-playing. For some people you may think about D&D or other RPG games, which are valid forms of role-playing, but for me I think about more detailed writing-based role-plays, and these are what I used to do with my friends in middle school, high school. It was just so fun, and it may sound silly, but I actually think I'm like the writer that I am today because I role-played and because I loved it. It was fun. And so essentially what we were doing is we were building a joint story. So I would write 3 paragraphs from one character's POV and my friend would write from another. And so we would just exchange from these different point of views and build a story. Role-playing, you guys all know how it goes. And the thing about role-playing that's so fun, especially in its writing form, is that it forces you to really think about how to build a fast-paced and responsive piece of text. You have to not just create a story, but you have to create a story that somebody can feed off of. So like if I just, what is that noise? You have to create something that is interactive. Like I can't just write a paragraph of nothing. I have to write a paragraph with enough substance for someone to respond to. And this was so good for me as someone who is an overwriter and very detailed and very prosy. I have a really bad tendency to just write like paragraphs of pretty words, which cool, they're pretty words, but they're not telling a story and they're not actually giving the reader anything to work with. Role-playing really forced me to actually think about like, what are the actions that need to happen? What is the conflict? What are the things that actually build a story? Because pretty words are pretty, they're great, they're fun, but that doesn't make you a good writer. It doesn't make you a good storyteller. Telling a story is about more than just building luscious details. So yeah, this one's technically cheating because you are writing when you're role-playing, unless you're doing something like D&D, which I also think is super helpful. Like playing Dungeons and Dragons will make you a better writer, best believe 100%. It engages your creativity and your imagination in ways that are fun and that make you feel a lot less pressured. It's just a great context for exploring your creativity. Also, world building. D&D players are some of the best world builders I have ever encountered. Like it's wild. Like y'all impress me. I've only played once, so I cannot call myself a part of that club, but I admire the world building skills of Dungeons and Dragons players. Alright everyone, that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let me know if you plan on integrating any of these into your writing practice, or if you already do some of these things. I would love to hear. Make sure that you drop a like, a comment, a subscribe, all of those good things. Y'all know the drill. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.